Hi everyone, welcome to our session today. This session is called The Cookies Are Crumbling. Take back ownership of your customer data. I'm your host, April Page. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager for FreshAddress. And before we get started, while we're waiting for a few people to come in, it's right at 3 o'clock, I just wanted to go through a few housekeeping items. So we are muting the lines today for this session, so please put any questions you have into the chat. I will convey those questions to the speakers as we get towards the end of the session today, and you'll have the chance to get their direct information if you want to contact them on your own. So just to help us with the chat, if you would go in the chat and put in where you're located. I'd love to see where you're logging in from your city or state, or just your state or your country, whatever you prefer to share. I'd love to see that, and that will help us see if our chat is working. Thank you so much. And then we are recording this webinar today, so we'll be sending that information in an email to you after the session today. You'll have access to the PDF as well as the recording and some other resources that might help you. Jen is kind enough to help us in our chat today with any technical issues. So if you have any issues, please put that in the chat and we will be happy to help. So let's get started. So today we have with us as our speakers, Jim Tinney, the Sales and Marketing Vice President for FreshAddress, and Seth Hirsch, the co-founder of ShopFluency, excuse me. And in our agenda today, we're going to go through and look at the background of both companies, the history of the cookie and where changes are going and how it affects you, the importance of renting versus owning your data, and how to develop best client personas and how to manage your email data. And at the end, we're going to go through what it all means, how personas and email data come together, and how you can utilize that to be a better marketer. So let's get started. Jim, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, thanks, April. So I just want to spend a few minutes on FreshAddress and who we are. FreshAddress is a leading provider of email marketing services. We work with over 2,500 clients, better than 25% of the Fortune 100. We are a 22-year-old company, so we've been around doing this for quite a long time. We've processed over 18 billion email addresses throughout our history. So what do? We actually help our clients clean, protect, and grow their email data asset. So if you think about clean, we help validate email lists, make sure that there are no toxic emails in your email list. We help identify undeliverable emails. Truly what we're looking to do is make sure that your email lists contain the email addresses of the folks that you are trying to reach. We protect our customers' email list through monitoring services. We have an offering called SafeToSend Plus that will continuously monitor your list to make sure that none of the emails on your list turn toxic. And then grow, we have a number of services to help you grow your email list healthfully. We have append services and email change of address that allow you to append or identify a new email address for a once performing email for any of your customers. We can actually append those addresses. But to point out differentiation, we only do this for your customers list. So we don't get into the prospecting, append, or email change of address. And then how we do it, we use best-in-class technology, again, databases that have been built over the experience of our 22 years, and we stand behind all of our products with deliverability guarantees. So Seth, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jim. Excited to be here today. Share a little bit more about ShopFluency and the work that we do. We specialize in helping growing e-commerce businesses that run on platforms like Shopify, Magento, WooCommerce, really any e-commerce platform, to better understand their customers and use that understanding to make better decisions. We've built this organization recently out of 20 years of consulting history that we have working with large Fortune 1000 type companies. So we've been customer analytics consultants sitting in boardrooms with executives and have been able to learn what these big companies are asking for, and have now built very scalable and affordable solutions that allow companies of any size that are marketing to in the B2C space to better understand their customers and ultimately make better decisions from that. We essentially take 128 million US households and have demographic data for all of them that we're able to help brands append to their customer base, and then build actionable customer profiles that we'll talk about a little bit later today that help that brand pinpoint exactly who their customers are and figure out what subset of the US population should they be focused on for growth, and how to then translate that into tools from across all marketing platforms, but we'll talk a little bit about email today, to make better use of their customer data and information.
So real quick, I wanted to go into the history of the cookie, and then the developments over the last 5 years, and why it's important to us as marketers to take a closer look at the changes in some of the policies of the larger browsers out there. The cookie was born over 25 years ago. I was kind of shocked to read up on that detail, but it's been around for 25 years. It was created in order to help distinguish one browser from another, and it allowed websites to capture some basic information. It's important to point out the distinction between the two types of cookies, a first-party cookie and a third-party cookie. A first-party cookie is one in which is set by the publisher or a site that the customer is visiting, and it's written to that specific domain. A third-party cookie is one which is set on the site by a different site or third party, obviously. For example, ad tracking. So a lot of sites now have ad tracking added to their websites. That would be considered a third-party cookie. There's a lot of changes being proposed by the different browsers out there. Most are impacting the third-party cookie. This is a result of consumers demanding greater privacy. So much of the legislation that's being written, much of the changes is being driven by the consumers' demand to be more private and have their searches be private. So this is the timeline of the last 5 years, 4 years actually. Apple made the first announcement, and you'll see Apple, Firefox, Chrome have all made announcements with changes to their cookie policies. All really deal with third party, except for Apple made an announcement or is already limiting the look back period on first party cookies on Safari to 24 hours. So that went from a 7-day look back period to a 24-hour look back period. And we expect that this is going to change more as the push for privacy is out there. So what can you do? What's important for marketers to do? You got to understand the impact to your business of what this will mean. If you can't measure ads, what are you going to do? Move towards people-based marketing and away from cookie-based targeting. So knowing more about your customers and owning your customer data is going to be extremely important. That's a lot of what we're going to talk about here today. And then just to kind of emphasize how important this really is, Chrome, Google announced in 2020 that by 2022, Chrome, which makes up 68.86% of browser usage, was going to block third-party cookies. So it's now become a real important issue for folks. So before we could kind of turn our heads and not really worry about it because Safari only made up 10% of the browser market, but now Chrome owning 68.6% of the market, there's some real teeth to this change. So we're really going to have to look at cultivating our own data. You're going to have to make sure that you're cleaning the lists that you have, updating and maintaining it regularly, and then coming up with some new ways to market to your customer base. And of course, the tried and true method, the highest return on investment for marketers has always been email. So we see a dynamic shift back to email, and Seth and I are going to talk to you about how to fine-tune your marketing via email, and how to avoid some of the pitfalls in dirty data as you're collecting new emails for your customers. So Seth, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Just to talk a little bit more about what was just being mentioned, renting versus owning, want to highlight some of the differences here and what the world that we've lived in digital marketing and cookie-based marketing has looked like, and what the old tried and true that's now a return to new again in terms of owning your customer relationship, what that looks like. Over the years, it's become very easy to rely on Facebook and Google to determine who the target customer should be for a particular campaign. They make it very easy to input some data and let them optimize who they're going to message to. Where that becomes difficult is the intelligence that went into that is all in a black box inside these walled gardens that we can't really understand exactly. So essentially our relationship with our customers and prospects when we're going through these platforms is really a rented relationship. The stakes can change at any moment, and it's really up to us to make sure that we're watching that and trying to monitor it. The other association with the renting is impressions, and in the last year the cost per impression in Facebook has on average gone up about 30%. So along with that is the cost per acquisition. So many of the businesses that we work with have seen the amount of money that they have to spend to acquire their next customer go up significantly, and that's because they're just out of control in terms of who they're marketing to and how much it's going to cost. And so the other flip side of that coin is owning the relationship. And this is not new. It's just new again for a lot of people that have become reliant, where 80% of a lot of companies' media focus has been in Facebook and Google, and the customer owned side of tactics has been not ignored, but not given the attention that it deserves. And so really owned relationships are ones where you know who you're targeting, who you're messaging towards, whether it's prospect or customer, that they've opted in to hear from you, and because of that, you have no fluctuation in your cost in communicating with them, and you have open access to understand how that customer's behavior has changed over time and reacts to different messages that you send to them. So just the concept behind this is, as some of the tech platforms become more and more influenced by the changes from a privacy perspective, that relying on just those channels is difficult. So one of the things that we're seeing a lot of brands do is diversify. So don't put all your eggs in one basket, and that is really this idea of returning to email marketing and direct mail and SMS and channels that are owned versus ones that are rented. Another thing that's not going to change is the value of creative. The more impactful your creative is through any channel, the more impactful your value proposition is, the more likely people will buy from you. So as it becomes more difficult to target customers relevantly in platforms like Facebook, the more important it will be for you to have a really clear message about why people should buy from you. And then we talked about owning the relationships and the value there. And what I'm going to talk about a little bit more is the value in building your own customer understanding. And I'll talk a little bit more about how some people have relied on Google Analytics to tell them who their customers are. And we'll talk a little bit more about the challenges with that moving forward in a post-cookie world. So really, we're going to hit on three main topics today on this conversation of owning versus renting. First, how to own your customer insights. Then we'll spend time, Jim will walk us through how to own your channel. We'll talk more about that, and then bringing those two things together in terms of what does it look like to understand who your customers are, build a really solid foundation of email list and database, and then to leverage that for really next level email marketing. So I mentioned at the beginning that ShopFluency, we help people understand who their customers are. Often when this whole conversation starts, brands will tell us, yeah, we know exactly who our customers are, and they'll show me a report that looks something like this. In this particular case, their highest bucket is 25 to 34, and they skew towards male in this or female in this particular case. But really, this question goes a lot deeper than that, and the value in unpacking who your customers are and what that means is something that can have significant impact on your business, not just in terms of the marketing channels that you're leveraging, but what products you develop, who you're going to target from a broader perspective. There's lots of ways that having a really solid foundation of this can help a brand. So I'm really going to quickly walk through. There are 5 things that we think that brands should do if they want to start understanding their customers better. And one of the challenges with Google Analytics, some of the data that's collected in Google Analytics is relying on cookie information. We're already starting to have clients that are able to track a smaller percentage of their customer behavior on their websites from post iOS 14. That it's becoming more difficult to identify the source of traffic and just understand in general. So when that happens, we need to rely and fall back to the data that we know is true, and that's ultimately the lower funnel metrics of conversions, and are we actually moving the needle from a sales perspective. And so a lot of clients that we've worked with have relied on Google Analytics to provide their business performance reporting, and not use systems like their e-commerce platform or their POS system or their CRM or building a data warehouse. So the first thing that brands need to do is find a way to have a source of data that they trust going forward. Once you have that, we so often come across cases where the metrics aren't known. You have to identify what the key metrics are for your brand and know them, have them at your fingertips at any point in time. Things like the cost per acquisition or customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, conversion rate, and knowing how these things translate from that single source of truth that you've developed. One of the things that I'm going to talk about today is how you can dive deeper, that not all customers are the same. You can append demographic data. You can work with a company like FreshAddress to append physical address that then allows you to append all sorts of data to your customer records. You can use self-reported data, but ultimately to understand that not all of your customers are the same. When we look at averages, we're going to end up with more average customers. And what I hope we can talk through today is that we don't want to focus on those average metrics that Google Analytics and other tools provide, and we want to focus on what are the different types of customers that we have and how do they each behave. Once we know that, we can then narrow into what the best target audience is for the brand. So many times we see, oh, I just put an ad into Facebook and Facebook optimizes the rest. And what we've been able to show through data is that there's probably about 15 to 20% of the US population that your company should be focused on. So the more you can name what that 15 to 20% of the US population is and target them and create content that's relevant to them, the better the performance will be across all channels. And then lastly, just once you have that 1 to 2 target customer profiles, how we can create content that's most relevant to them. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the best client personas or customer profiles. I mentioned already that not all customers are the same. Essentially what our process does, and you can do this many other ways, but what we do is we take our client's email database or their customer database, and we append household level demographic data, things like age, income, presence of children, marital status. And we're able to then understand at first the averages, but then within this particular business, you can see how significantly different their customers are. And this all falls out when you're looking at averages. So while their average customer might be 48 years old, you can see we've got this group on the left, modest millennials, that are 23% of their sales, and they're 33 years old. They're more likely to be female than the average customer, and they have a much lower household income. As you look all the way to the right-hand side, just to point out a second group here, Balanced Bliss, they're also about 20% of sales, but instead of the last group was 33 years old, this group is 50. So if we just look at the average and know that our customers are 45 years old on average, we lose that we've got these 33-year-olds that have a certain behavior and these 50-year-olds, and even the group next to them, steady seniors, are 64. So understanding how all these groups differ is extremely important. Now, it's helpful to know these demographics, but it's even more helpful to start looking at what this means for real-life business metrics. And in this particular case, looking at conversion rates, and this is conversion over a period of time, as we market to and speak to customers of each of these profiles, what does this mean in terms of how likely am I to get each of these profiles to become a customer? So that modest millennial group that we looked at is down here at 2.2%, whereas Balanced Bliss is at 12.6. So wouldn't I want to spend my time focused on creating products that are relevant, creating messages and creative that are relevant to Balanced Bliss in this particular case, so that I can convert more customers over time? It might cost more in Facebook. We generally see that the cost per impression for a Balanced Bliss type profile can be 5 times more in some cases than another customer profile. That's even more important why, if we can acquire email addresses for prospects, then we can message these people over and over again relevantly and convert them without having to pay the costs of what it looks like to do that in Facebook. So another way of looking at that is these top two profiles have a 9.7% conversion rate compared to 5.2, which is my average overall for this business. So I can essentially double my conversion rate by focusing on just these two profiles, making sure that my ads are targeted towards them, that my creative is relevant to them, that they're happy with my product, and I can help grow the business by understanding those individuals at a deeper level. I'm going to turn it back over to Jim to talk a little bit more about what this looks like from a channel perspective. Jim, are you there?
Sorry, I forgot to hit the unmute. Thanks, Seth. So now that you know who you want to target and who you have the best opportunity to convert, as Seth pointed out, it's really important to build an email database that it will increase your likelihood to actually reach the folks that you intend to send the email to. So, and before I get into that, I want to just point out the email trends that we've been seeing. You know, number one, email accounts are growing worldwide. We're up over 5.6 billion emails worldwide. The number two trend is scary. 31% of email change their email address each year. So that means a lot of emails are being abandoned. So, you know, unlike when you move and you know, close out your utility account and then you start up a new utility account with your new address, when you leave an old email address, you basically abandon it and you just leave it there. You're not reaching out to Yahoo or Google or AOL to say, I'm no longer using this email account. It just stays there inactive. And by doing that, that actually creates some problems for marketers, because those emails can quickly turn into a recycled spam trap or something that can greatly impact your ability to reach the inbox. Number three, we're seeing that the total annual email marketing spend has been increasing year over year. It's expected to grow 25% annually. It's already over 3 billion. And then number four, email deliverability is actually the largest challenge facing email marketers today. roughly 20% of emails fail to get to the inbox. And that could be for a number of reasons. It could be, your subject lines are coming across as very salesy or spammy, so they get moved directly to the spam filter. It could be, you're hitting that ISP too frequently, and so you're kind of getting throttled. Your users could be tired of your messaging and just creating a spam complaint for you, or more likely, you're starting out with a email list that contains bouncing and toxic email addresses. And so it's important to get the proper email validation in place. So poor email data quality costs your company money. That's a fact. Think of it this way. If you're only getting your inbox placement to roughly 80%, that's 20% of customers that have given you an email address, and for whatever reason, you're not able to deliver to it anymore, you're missing 20% of those folks that wanted to hear from you. If you get blocked or have some kind of problem with sending emails, it doesn't only affect the 20%, it could in fact affect your entire email list, meaning you can't get to any of your customers. So it's really important to make sure your email data quality is the highest possible. There's many types of bad email addresses. I'm going to talk about the types here in a second. It's really important to look at where you're acquiring your email addresses from, and putting validation at the point of entry for those acquisition points. And then, what we've seen with our customers is that proper email validation yields huge results. So you've got to, and I'll add a point here, best practices is validate and cleanse your entire existing email list today. Just clean out the bad, make sure you're starting with a pristine email list. And then as you add emails to that list, it's really important to continue validating those incoming emails. We also suggest that you create some kind of frequency to either revalidate or work with a monitoring service that will watch your email list and tell you when there's problems. So we could talk a little bit about that in a second. And if starting out with a clean list, keeping your list clean, you'll have better inbox placement. If your inbox placement increases, you'll have higher engagement and thus higher revenues. And then lastly, work with a validation provider that can help correct errors in an email address. And I'll go into this in here in a second as I go through the process. So first I want to talk about the types of bad email addresses. One, you have problematic email addresses. These are your honeypots, your spam traps, your toxic email addresses that can really wreak havoc on your deliverability. Two, invalid email accounts, so accounts that actually don't even exist. Spam complainers are actually, you shouldn't be emailing to someone that's a high spam complainer, as it can impact how the ISP views you as a sender. Typos in your email, so think of jimtinney@gmail.com, versus a jimtinney@gmail.com. Typo emails are bad for two reasons. One, you won't, it will bounce and not be deliverable. Or two, it could actually be a typo trap and you're unknowingly emailing a spam trap. Role accounts are accounts that have multiple addresses associated with it. So think of sales at, inquiry at, help at, might have 20 users. Why are those email addresses bad? Well, it actually increases the opportunity for someone to hit a spam complaint button. And so where you're only emailing once, you might get, multiple spam complaints against you. And then bogus email addresses. So these are, in fact, made up email addresses that as you're trying to email them, obviously they won't deliver. So it's important to work with a validation provider that can help clean all of these types of bad email addresses from your file. So how proper email validation works, and SafeToSend from FreshAddress, what that does is there's a 3-step process. One, it's check, correct, and protect. One is check. We make sure that each email is valid and deliverable. 2, we check your list for any spelling and syntax errors contained within an email address. So those, example of a syntax error might be a double @ sign or double period, or a spelling mistake might be jtinney@gmail.com, as I referenced before. We correct all those, we retest them, make sure that they're deliverable. And then 3, protect. This is where we're actually looking at email addresses that we have fingerprinted or identified as a spam trap, as a honeypot, as a frequent spam complainer. We protect you by identifying those types of emails in your list so that you can remove them from your email list. It's important to do this for your full file, but also you want to keep the data valid as you collect. The best way to do that is to continuously validate at the point of entry. So if you think of the different points of entry that are possible, you have point of sale system, websites, call centers. All these are different entry points. A point of sale center, just for reference, 30% failure rate in getting a correct email in. Why? Because usually it's a cashier or someone that is not very interested in whether the data is correct, and so they don't take the time to enter it correctly. Having a validation at point of sale will help make sure that the email is entered correctly, otherwise it will not pass through. Your website, we've seen data of roughly 4% failure rate in accurate information being entered at the website. This is the best place for you to make sure that you have real-time validation set up so that you can let the user know that the email they provided wasn't accurate if they want to provide a new one. And then you can set the rules as to when to let someone through or not. And then call center, 12% failure rate. Again, because this is human entry, an employee of your company is entering the information. They may not be taking the time to check their work as they go. So you want to have real-time validation at your call center system. So the benefits of real-time at all these different entry points, you just avoid the bad data entering your database and kind of muddying the pool, if you will. This way, when you're passing the leads on to your reps or your marketers, they're getting good data to act off of, and they won't be emailing to folks that are going to bounce or, in fact, damage your sender reputation. We can deliver this information directly to your CRM, your ERP, or your central database, however you are managing your data. And all this is being done to make sure that we prevent high bounce rates and the other associated deliverability issues one might have. Slide's still not advancing. So I was going to show an example of a real-time, but I'm going to skip that for now. And then I wanted to point out, so, if you only have an email address, and Seth was talking about adding all this additional data and, the buying persona, if you only have an email address, there are services out there. FreshAddress offers a reverse append service where you will take an email address and match it to a username and postal address. Once you have that information, you can add additional demographics information that could be used to build out your buying personas. So what it all means, Seth, I was going to turn it over to you to talk about what it all means.
Yeah, thanks. There's the way to kind of think about this that we had discussed is just At the end of the day, hopefully you've been able to see that there's going to be new ways of developing customer understanding. Return to using your conversion data that comes from your e-commerce platform or your whatever your system of record is, and really focusing on what can you do to analyze that data. One of those things that you can do is develop some sort of customer profile that allows you to understand how customer group A compares to customer group B. That can lead you down the path of how you might want to target those customers differently in digital channels. It can also lead you to how can I make my email campaigns better by having this information. We work with dozens of companies that use their email service provider to feed in this demographic data that we've created, and we've worked with them over the years, big companies, small companies, to be able to say what messages are relevant to customers across in the email channel by using this profile data that we've created. And what we've been able to see is that I have the ability to, for a prospect, to target them with the right message. So if I can know a profile for a prospect, which you can do with what Jim was talking about, where you can append a physical address to an email record, I can start to know, well, what products would be most likely for that individual to buy when they first make when they're going to make their first purchase with me. I can tailor my subject line, tailor my creative to be relevant to that particular profile's likely product journey. We've seen one particular brand that we've worked with is a sporting goods company, and what happened for them was they were able to identify that there were certain categories that certain profiles were more likely to buy. And we were able to help them by saying, if you just do something as simple as changing your subject line to use this demographic profile to tailor your content, not only is it going to boost your open rates by sending something relevant to these individuals, but it's also going to increase your conversion rates down the funnel. So we've been focused on things well beyond opens and clicks, things like coupon redemption rates or sales conversion, or actually how much people are spending as a result of receiving a certain campaign. And in this particular case, it ended up resulting in $44,000 a week, or when they send this email out every 2 weeks, that just by changing subject line, so no extra creative effort, tailoring it for what's relevant to the individual, that's about $1.1 million a year without any extra creative effort. So this first party data that you have can be used to create all sorts of different segments and different groupings of customers, demographic being one that we've seen be extremely impactful from a targeting perspective that has trickle down effects all the way to how do I go about sending the right message to my customers that have opted in for email. So the combination of customer understanding plus this really powerful data quality tool that FreshAddress has ultimately gives you a better setup for targeted email, and the importance of that now more than ever with other digital channels experiencing some setbacks as a result of these upcoming privacy changes that we're seeing. So I will turn it back to April. I think we have a few questions that have popped in, and we will see what else we can answer for you guys today. Well, I can see some of the questions. I think one that we had actually chatted about this, there's some new news that came out yesterday. For those of you who have been watching, iOS 14.5 rolled out about a month and a half ago. That's had significant impact on Facebook in particular. And now yesterday, Apple announced some changes that are coming with iOS 15. And this one actually crosses over into email a little bit more. So Jim, do you want to take the first pass at that question?
Yeah, so one, it's early. Two, the last time Apple made an announcement like this, they then delayed, so we'll see if there's a delay. But for those of you who did not read the announcement, Apple is talking about blocking open and click tracking within the Apple Mail system. And so, that is obviously going to have an impact on people's ability to, track engagement analytics for emails on Apple devices. So, I think it's early to tell. I think it's going to be interesting to see who else follows suit. Google has kind of always messed with the data a little bit on engagement. I know that, they don't allow you to track how long an email is open, so you don't get accurate read data on Google. I think the concerning thing might be that Apple was even mentioning blocking pixels. So, the email engagement analytics vendors and tools out there are going to have to figure out another way to measure this. But what it means for marketers, I think it puts a higher importance on making sure that you have a clean email list, because if you're not going to be able to use engagement analytics and data to maintain and manage your list, you're going to want to make sure that you're sending to real emails so that you're not destroying your email, your email sender reputation. So, validating is going to become more important. And then I think Seth's message around buying personas and emailing to the right people that have the most likely chance to convert for you is going to be even more important in your email marketing efforts. I don't know if you have anything to add on that, Seth, but.
Yeah, I think one other topic is just the lower funnel metrics aren't going to change. At the end of the day, it's about how we get customers to see something relevant and want to buy from us. And so when it comes to which customers actually converted that we sent a certain message, that goes all the way back to matchback reporting for direct mail, and is something that we know who we're sending a message to and we know who's converting. No matter what happens in between, there's opportunities for us to be able to understand the effectiveness of our messages. So there are things that are coming, whether it's digital marketing with what's already happening, or if there are changes to email marketing, the raw foundation of owning your customer data and that first party information that you have, and then knowing what parameters you have to play within, will still give people valuable data that they can base decisions off of. So I would say that makes it even more important to make sure you've got something besides Google Analytics that's telling you how many sales you had yesterday and which customers bought them and what those customers look like compared to the ones that bought the day before. So I think it reinforces the importance of owning as much of this relationship as you can, as big tech companies are kind of having an opportunity and to kind of change the stakes from a advertising technology standpoint.
Absolutely. It almost feels like we're going to go back to email marketing measurements 10 years ago, where you measured based on the revenues driven from your email campaigns.
Absolutely. Yep. And ultimately, that's the one that we all get judged on. So got to stick to those basics.
Yep, absolutely. Do you see another question there, Seth?
One came through asking, what is the first thing that you would do to get started down this path? So what's the first thing that you would do to overcome cookies going away? You got essentially call it a year, 6 months to a year runway before Chrome takes place, and what are the things that you need to be looking at?
Well, I think the way I'd answer that is the absolute first thing I'd do is I'd focus on my data strategy, building out my customer database. The slide that you presented around rent versus own is really important here. So you got to build out your owned data asset. As you're doing that, you want to make sure you're putting in clean data. So I would have a validation policy in place and make sure that all emails added to your database are deliverable and clean. And then I would start to work on identifying who your best customers are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just echoing one piece of that is stockpiling of people who want to hear from you, a relationship. So we've worked with a number of brands lately that have been investing a lot in their lead ads in Facebook, and some that have been acquiring tens of thousands of engaged emails that now they have this relationship with that they can carry forward no matter what happens with a cookie. And so revisiting your lead acquisition strategy so that you've been able to, over this next 6 months, been able to develop and grow a larger email database so that you can then follow that through to how do I get them to convert, and having a longer conversation with those customers. And so just kind of back into what we've been talking about, the importance of developing a solid email strategy and develop a list of people to communicate with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we figured out what happened to April. She lost power. She's in Durham, North Carolina, and apparently a lightning storm took out her power and internet. So, Seth, good job rolling with the punches here as we deal with some technical difficulties.
Thank you guys for bearing with us.
So what we will do from a housekeeping perspective, we will send out a recording of this webinar. It may be re-recorded, just a suggestion. We'll also send out the slide deck. If anybody has any questions that we haven't answered, we will take care of them via email. And feel free to reach out to either Seth or myself with any questions that you might have. We'd love to talk more about this topic. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Seth, thank you. I thought the conversation was very interesting, informative, and enjoyable.
Yes, thanks for having me, Jim. It's been great to chat with you today, and looking forward to following up with anyone that has any further questions.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.